First, I did this topic about Shazam, but then I was requested to do this topic about Superman.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Pitch This here on the MrEliMac YouTube channel. I'm your host MrEliMac, and today I have a new topic requested in the comment section of, I want to say, the original video of what if the Spider-Man movies were Shazam. They asked about doing this same topic but with Superman instead. So here I am to do this with Superman. This one was a little bit easier, I want to say, because Superman was and is a more notable character, and so it's a lot easier to sort of look into his sort of stories to see what stories to tell, and it's also a little bit easier, especially when it comes to the villain standpoint of which villain should appear in certain movies. But also it was a little bit harder on how to make both of the movie universes separate, like the Raimi trilogy and the Andrew Garfield duology, having to make those seem different enough so that I don't seem to be copying myself from one franchise to another. So that was sort of the harder part, but I think I was able to get a better idea of what to do for this. But before I get into the topic, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel, and hit the notification bell. That way you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. Now let's get into the topic, and we're starting out with the Raimi trilogy of films, the Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 of this Spidey series. And with Spider-Man 1, it's of course going to be Superman, where we're going to see the characters of Clark Kent, Superman, Lois Lane, John Corbin, who I'm looking at as my Harry Osborn character. In the Silver Age of comics, John Corbin was written sort of as a reporter, and sure, he was a little on the eviler side of being a reporter, like hiding his ways as a thief. Instead, in this sort of universe, I'm just keeping John Corbin to be a sort of reporter-esque character that works at the Daily Planet along with Lois and Clark, because I just wanted something a little bit cleaner. Also because I needed a Harry Osborn character, sort of an ally that turns into a villain by the time the third one comes in. I saw that the Silver Age version of John Corbin was written as a reporter, so I decided to keep that in there. Jonathan and Martha Kent are obviously in this because they are the Uncle Ben and Aunt May characters. Perry White and Jimmy Olsen also in this because you can't do a Superman movie without Perry White or Jimmy Olsen. Pause for reasons that are obvious. Anyway, for the main antagonist, I decided to keep it very simple because Green Goblin, the main antagonist of the Spider-Man film, also the main recurring antagonist of Spider-Man in general. So the main antagonist of the first Superman movie is Lex Luthor, who I know making it Lex Luthor is very similar to the first Superman movie that ever came out in the 1970s, so it's just obvious. But in this one, I'm making it more of like, oh, this is billionaire businessman trying to do evil things against Superman, but having to hide that he's doing it. But then ultimately he wears the green power armor suit and fights Superman. And sort of just to wrap up this little storyline of Lex having a final fight with Superman with like some kryptonite inside of the armor to give him an extra little advantage. Ultimately, Lex is not killed. He is gone to prison because I don't want to kill my villains. That's something I personally don't like to do. I don't like to kill my villains. So Lex Luthor does not die, and that's sort of the end of the superhero tale. The main story is that this is the origin story of Superman, how he first comes to Metropolis. I would say the age range is about mid-20s getting into Metropolis. I say that specifically because there's a big importance I wanted to have for the other two movies that I will talk about later. But this is very much Superman's first time in Metropolis, him getting to know Lois, John and Perry and Jimmy. Martha Kent is there sort of as the Aunt May character. He occasionally flies back to Smallville to have moments with Martha Kent and sort of those sort of emotional beats that we have in the Spider-Man film. But also, this is a moment of Superman trying to find himself as Superman. He debuts, he is Clark Kent. Originally, I would say, like, the first half of the movie, sort of like how in Spider-Man, like, the first good third of the film, he doesn't really become Spider-Man, and then he goes off and becomes Spider-Man. I would say that's sort of the same with Clark here. In the first third, he doesn't really do any Superman antics because he doesn't know if he should out himself as Superman. But then when it gets to the point where he has to become Superman, he becomes Superman, and then we're off to the races with it. And Lex Luthor serving as our main antagonist. As I said, they get into a little brawl at the end of the film in the green armor suit. And a part of me wants to wonder if I should do like a little helmet mask covering up his face to sort of be like, is this Lex Luthor? Is this someone else? Who knows? And then when we get the reveal, like, you can see the Lex Luthor face under the helmet to be like, okay, Lex Luthor is the bad guy and he's the one fighting, even though it'll be obvious to the audience. And that's sort of this first Superman movie. And then we get over to the Spider-Man 2 analog, which is Superman 2. We have the returning cast of Clark Kent, Lois Lane, John Corbin going a little bit more into his evil deeds and some extra stuff with him near the end of the movie. Martha Kent, Jimmy Olsen, and Perry White are sort of our main returning characters. Jerry White is a new character that would be introduced, and in the comics he is the son of Perry White. And look, I know we did the son of Perry White in Superman Returns, but we did the son of J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man 2, so I wanted to continue with that thread, and so Jerry White is that character. I think it's so funny that whenever they have a child of a major publisher, editor-in-chief, like mentor figure to our lead hero, they automatically have to do a romance with the main love interest in the film. And so, like, that's just a little plot trope that they do. And so I'm continuing that trope here because that's what I'm having to continue. And so Jerry and Lois are sort of in a romance because Clark was like, no, I can't be in a romance with Lois because of wanting to protect her, wanting to make sure she doesn't get hurt. And then we get into this film where Clark's sort of like being rejecting of that idea, and we start seeing moments of him losing his powers, not being Superman. And it's mainly due to the fact of the main antagonist that is in this film. Tell you who that is later. Another major supporting character that we get, who I'm looking at as my Dr. Connors analog, is Professor Emil Hamilton. Emil Hamilton, very much a major supporting character, also becomes an antagonist to Superman in the comics. I'm not touching that. I prefer him being a supporting character. I don't really like him doing a heel turn. I prefer him staying as a face, and so we're going to keep that in the universe. The main antagonist of the film is Brainiac, because I was trying to look at a character that you could have, like, because when you look at the main antagonists of Spider-Man, the main three that they do as the arch enemies are Green Goblin, Doc Ock, and Venom. So I did my Green Goblin, which was Lex Luthor, and now to do the Doc Ock antagonist, sort of like the secondary arch enemy, that's sort of Brainiac for Superman. And so Brainiac is the main antagonist doing his end of the world plot, but also mainly focusing it on Metropolis and Superman losing his powers because there's something with Brainiac that's causing Clark to lose some of his powers and being more human-esque, and it's because Brainiac has some Kryptonian technology, but we don't see any of the Kryptonian heritage throughout these entire films. Actually, we have an understanding. It's like, oh, Clark Kent is from Krypton, he is Kal-El. We mentioned that when they do the first interview between Lois and Clark, or Lois and Superman. We get that understanding of Superman is from Krypton. That's done. We understand that. We're moving on. And we don't see how his planet is destroyed. We just start with it in the film. We just start with, he's on Earth, we're going on. Because reasons I'll tell later. But yeah, this is very much the idea of just him trying to stop Brainiac. And Brainiac, I want to portray Brainiac because Doc Ock is such a sympathetic character in the film. I'm really trying to think of a way to make Brainiac a sympathetic character. It's just really hard because Brainiac is a character that's not really has ever been written with any sympathy, and I know you could sort of say that with Doc Ock as well, but there you can always find a way to make a character who is human, like Doc Ock, sympathetic. And so me trying to find a way to make Brainiac sympathetic, the main thing I can think of is that he is the last survivor of Cthulhu, his home planet, and it's just he is trying to save the knowledge. Like, it's not that he purposely wiped out his planet, it's that his planet was dying like Krypton, and so in the last ditch effort he saved his planet and the knowledge of his planet by bottling the city. And what he's really doing is he's noticing that some planets are close to extinction, and in his mind he's trying to save all the planets. And maybe near the end Superman is able to show Brainiac, like, hey, you're not saving this planet, your equations are off, this planet is not near extinction, because of you this planet is going to become extinct, it's because of you and what you're doing. And maybe that's how Brainiac's like, okay, I'm gonna stop, but because the destruction, the thing that I've done with my ship is about to happen, there's only one way I can stop it, and if I take it into my ship and just purposely not have it go to your planet at all. So that's sort of how I'm thinking of a way to make Brainiac sympathetic. I am killing Brainiac because sort of whenever I look at Brainiac, it's like, oh, that's sort of the only way you can do it. And so maybe that's how you do the Brainiac stuff and make him a sympathetic character, of him actually trying to be a good person and save each planet, but ultimately realizing through Superman, it's like, no, I'm not actually saving them, I'm actually destroying them. I thought I was being a savior, I'm actually being a destroyer. So maybe that's how you can do it. I don't know, that's just an idea that I'm thinking about. But near the end of the film, this is when we would see John Corbin to complete his storyline of him discovering Clark Kent as Superman, and then him getting severely injured through something that happened with Brainiac, and then him getting experimented on by mysterious scientific organization. And that's how we start getting into Metallo. And that's Superman 2. And now we're moving on to the Spider-Man 3 analog, which is Superman 3. And we get the returning characters of Superman, Lois Lane, Metallo, Martha Kent, Perry White, Jimmy Olsen, and Professor Emil Hamilton. I nearly mentioned a character that I haven't mentioned yet. The Gwen Stacy analog is Lana Lang. I wanted her because she is another major love interest of Superman. Wanted her to have a presence in this film since Gwen Stacy did. The George Stacy analog is Dan Turpin. We needed a major police figure to match Captain Stacy, and that's who Dan Turpin is. Again, Metallo, John Corbin, being one of the early antagonists, but then sort of losing his memory in some way. I don't know how. Maybe instead of him losing his memory, he gets the kryptonite heart taken out of him and he's just out of commission for a good majority of the film. Maybe that's what we do with him, and then through nefarious means find a way to bring him back, but then he actually is more of a heroic character near the end. I don't know. But then the other antagonist, the Sandman analog, I decided to go with Rudy Jones, aka Parasite, a character that I think you could easily make sympathetic of. He's not trying to kill people when he is doing his parasite thing, he's just trying to survive. Sort of like, here's the best analog. When you watch the animated film Superman Man of Tomorrow, he is not an antagonistic character. He's the main antagonist, but he's not a villainous character. You don't look at him and think, oh, he's the villain. He is maliciously doing all of these things. He's actually doing these things out of just will. Like, all of this is just happening. And Superman is able to save the day without having to fight him. He's able to see the good in Rudy, and Rudy is able to, sacrifice himself to save Metropolis. And so you can sort of take a way to do that in this film. And with the Venom character, if you can see the poster sort of right over here, you can see that it is Bizarro, because I very much wanted to have the Venom analog, which is sort of like the evil version of Spider-Man, and so the evil version of Superman in terms of the main thing is Bizarro, and you can do Bizarro. This version of Bizarro is a clone of Superman from nefarious evil organization. I don't want it to be Lex Luthor. If it is Lex Luthor, or maybe I do want it to be Lex Luthor, it's just we never see Lex Luthor on camera. He's just behind the scenes. Or if we want to do the thing where they had Willem Dafoe appear as like memory things in the Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, just have Lex Luthor appear in quick cameos being like, oh, how all my mechanization's going, and then that's how you have the Bizarro stuff in Superman 3, that's how you do the Metallo stuff at the end of Superman 2. You just do all that with having Lex Luthor just cameo in all these films, and we get Superman seeing this evil version of himself, or like realizing there's some, like, he's not doing enough in his mind, he's not doing enough to save the day, and then suddenly this Bizarro, this clone of Superman, is around doing better than him, and he's just like, maybe I shouldn't be Superman anymore. This other thing is doing better than I can. And then we get Bizarro turning into Bizarro, and Bizarro sort of finding some intelligence as well, sort of taking little elements of the Smallville version of Bizarro, of him still being malicious, and still having his own mental facilities, but also slightly having some of the distorted speech that Bizarro normally has, him teaming up with Parasite, Superman bringing back Metallo even though he's hesitant, and finding a way to speak with John Corbin and being like, hey, we need to work together. Like, I know why you mainly attack me is because you think I'm a threat to Metropolis, but right now we have two more threats in Parasite and Bizarro, and Superman and Metallo team up to face Parasite and Bizarro. Metallo ultimately dies in the film. Bizarro gets eliminated, and Parasite is brought to Stryker's Island. And that's sort of what you can do with Superman 3. And that's it for the Raimi trilogy. And now we go over to the Andrew Garfield duology of the Amazing Spider-Man films. And for the Amazing Spider-Man, I did The Adventures of Superman, which was another comic book title from the 90s that they did, The Adventures of Superman. And for this one specifically, I mentioned specifically that in the Raimi trilogy, in the first one, he's sort of in his mid-20s. The reason why I mentioned that was because in this film, I'm having Clark be 18. Like, this is literally right out of high school, young Clark. Like, about to go to college Clark. And these movies are set in Smallville. Like, this is pre-Metropolis. We don't see Lois Lane. We don't see Jimmy. We don't see the typical supporting cast. This is a younger Superman. And this is also the reason why I didn't go heavily with the Kryptonian heritage in the original trilogy. Is because we're going to focus that here. So we're going to get Clark Kent, Superman, Lana Lang as our Gwen Stacy, Thomas Lang, who is Lana Lang's dad in the comics, that's the George Stacy. We're getting Jor-El and Lara Lovan. We're getting some hints of the backstory, playing the parents. Jonathan and Martha Kent are still in this, but Jonathan would still die. Kenny Braverman sort of serving as the Flash Thompson. Lisa Davis serving as like that one girl in that one scene, but I'm having her be a little bit more of a character. Jackson Erdell was a name of a character I created, but he is based off of Jax sort of serving as the Dr. Rotha character, the person that worked at Oscorp, his character. And the main antagonist, Dr. Gerard Shugel, aka ultra-humanite. I really wanted to have an antagonist from the golden age of Superman to be the main antagonist, sort of like a mad scientist-esque character. And also in this duology, I would depower Superman to be a little bit more like the golden age, where it's like he's faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. He's only able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. He can't fly in this because he's still sort of getting to know his powers. And this would sort of be why he's able to go toe-to-toe with Ultra-Humanite in a fight, because Ultra-Humanite I would have be a little bit enhanced in strength because of the genetic engineering that Dr. Gerard Shugel was doing. And so we get Shugel, or Ultra-Humanite, wanting to change the world into his image and take all the minds of the people he thinks are lesser than and enhance them into what he believes is better for the world. And he starts with Smallville. Smallville is sort of like his testing ground. And so we're sort of getting that sort of story, and Superman or Clark very much feeling hesitant about his life, not really feeling confident about himself, and sort of the idea that I look at as this costume. I go back to the Action Comics run that Grant Morrison did, where he was just wearing a t-shirt, a blue t-shirt with an S, a cape, blue jeans, and boots. Like, that sort of a costume I'm looking at as the costume for the first Adventures of Superman. And him sort of trying to learn more about his past and learning more about who he is and discovering that there's something more that's going on with ultra-humanite. In fact, we would get the woman in shadows, not the man in shadows, but the woman in shadows, who would be revealed to be Ursa in later installments, if we would have gotten later installments. And ultimately, ultra-humanite would be arrested, brought to jail, into a secure facility, maybe Bel Rev, and Ursa basically being like, you didn't really go up to your end of the bargain. And Jack Sir would die. We would get the idea of kryptonite in this, and ultra-humanite would use kryptonite against Jack Sir, because I would have ultra-humanite knowing that Jack Sir was a Kryptonian and like a different being, not from this planet. And yeah, that's sort of what the story is for the Adventures of Superman, where it's like Clark is trying to learn more about his past and him trying to learn to become a hero. And then we move on to the Adventures of Superman 2, where in this one, this costume that he is wearing is more inspired by Superman Earth 1, where it's a Superman costume, but it's not fully Superman costume. Like, it's not a traditional Superman costume. Well, it is. Look, you just got to read Superman Earth 1, and I have the poster right over here to where you can see what the costume is looking like. Superman and Lana Lang are returning, Jor-El and Lara Lorvan are returning, and Martha Kent is returning. And we would sort of see the death of Lana Lang in this one. But, like, the main antagonists, some antagonists we would have are Charlie Questkill, who is Quetzal in reality, and he's sort of serving as the Donald Mencken character, sort of working with the bad guys in this situation. Winslow Schott, Toyman, would be in it, sort of serving as Rhino in this film. Leslie Willis, Livewire, is the Electro character, because I really like the idea of the main character going up against an electric-based character. And so Livewire is that. And again, Superman is still a little depowered here. And so going up against Livewire would be like an even fight. But then for the main antagonist, sort of the major big bad antagonist, the Harry Osborn character, is not John Corbin Metallo. I'm not doing that. I'm not taking a villain from the original trilogy and popping them in this duology. No, in fact, that character is General Zod. And this is why we're going into more of the Kryptonian heritage, is because in this duology, we're having more Kryptonians pop up. And it would be because I would want to set up a team sort of called, based off of the Superman Revenge Squad. And that is a supervillain team of just people that want revenge on Superman. And this is sort of where we would start setting it up. And yeah, it wouldn't be that great. And again, it's still Superman learning more about his Kryptonian heritage. He goes up against Livewire, who is very much a radio host in Smallville that does not like Superman and just wanting to shut him down. And then when Zod would arrive, it would be a slugfest between Superman and Zod. And I would even have it to where this is when Superman starts to learn how to fly, because Zod would have that ability. It's like, oh, I can fly and you can't. And then this is where we start seeing Superman beginning to fly, because by this point 2 years had passed since the last adventure, and so now his powers are becoming a bit stronger. He's able to go up against stronger foes like Zod. This is when his powers start to increase after his fight with Livewire. And yeah, that would sort of be that final fight, and it's just Superman trying to connect with his heritage. And I would even have Quetzal reveal that he is Kryptonian to Superman, and have him being like, hey, you are a missing link that could help us, your heritage, why don't you help us? And I would have it to where Superman would want to work with the other Kryptonians, and then when he starts finding out, like, oh no, you are part of you are some of the bad ones on Krypton, you are some of the evil Kryptonians, I don't want to work with you. And then that's when we get into that little thing. And that is what if the Spider-Man movies were Superman. I mean, Some of them were a little bit easier to do, some of them were a bit harder, but ultimately in the end, I think I was able to get a good balance. But what were your thoughts on the ideas that I presented to you? It was a little hard to try to distinguish them, but the moment I decided to distinguish them, the way I decided was just the original trilogy is more traditional Superman, and the duology is more, okay, let's just stick with Smallville. Let's stick in Smallville and make Superman younger and deal with younger Superman. That was the best way I could find to do that. But what were your thoughts on the ideas? Did you like them? Did you hate them? Were you indifferent? Whatever your thoughts, post them in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you can be up to date with all the videos I have here on the channel. And make sure to hit the notification bell. That way you, yes, you right there, you can be notified whenever a new video like this comes your way. Also, I have a little thing on my posts tab, on the little thing in the community tab, where I am taking questions for a Q&A video. So if you want to submit your questions for the Q&A, please go over to the community tab and please submit your questions. I would love to have your questions. Also, if you want to not go there, you can go over to my personal Twitter account at MrEliMac. I have a little post that also has a link for an NGL, where if you don't want your to be known, if you don't want your username to be known, those are little anonymous questions that you can have there. So yeah, please make sure to submit questions for the Q&A video. And again, I've been MrEliMac, you've been the audience, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.